Avatar: The Last Airbender is the latest Universes Beyond set, bringing the classic Nickelodeon show to the world of Magic the Gathering. With this set comes dozens of new legendary creatures, many of which are affiliated with the 4 types of bending from the Avatar world. I've been exploring many of these to see which of them are inspiring for a commander deck, and while I know that many people have been rallying around Toph the First Metalbender, I found one that I like even more that I think can be even more powerful. Toph, Earthbending Master, is a 4-mana, 2/4 human warrior ally with a Landfall trigger, giving us an experience counter whenever a land we control enters. Next, whenever we attack, we Earthbend X, where X is the number of experience counters we have. For clarification, since this is a new mechanic, when we Earthbend, one target land we control becomes a 0/0 creature with haste that's still a land. We then put X +1/+1 counters on it. Some Earthbenders have determined numbers, others, like Toph, are variable based on other factors. When the land either dies or is exiled, it returns to the battlefield tapped, as a land. A few rulings I want to discuss before we go further. First, experience counters go on us as the player, and they can be proliferated as any counter on us can. There aren't many ways to interact with these counters, so Toph can easily stockpile a hefty number of experience counters if we get her onto the battlefield early enough. If Toph leaves the battlefield and comes back later, those counters will remain the same. This allows her ability to scale as our game progresses. Next, Earthbending is similar to the Awaken ability from Battle for Zendikar, but more powerful. Both will animate our lands and make them into creatures, but while the Earthbending mechanic doesn't grant the land any creature types, while the awakened lands become elementals, it does grant the land a unique recursion ability. A land that's been earthbent into a creature will return to the battlefield tapped as a land should it die or be exiled. There are a lot of interesting applications to this, such as fetch lands or even Toph's Landfall ability. If you earthbend on something like, say, a Windswept Heath, and then you sacrifice the Heath, fetch for a land, then you can return the Windswept Heath back to the battlefield as a land, netting you at least 2 additional Landfall triggers and a land we can animate later on. Our deck will focus on landfall triggers and earthbending. We're going to want Toph out as early as we can cast her so we can begin gaining experience counters. Once she's out, we're going to be able to use our lands as a very resilient force. We have 14 sources of the earthbending mechanic, and while there are others beyond what we've included here, I wanted to make the deck as aggressive as possible early game. Our landfall here is our infrastructure. We want to play at least 1 land per turn, and we have quite a few ways to get more lands out. Like most landfall decks, we want to prioritize land ramp over things like mana dorks and mana rocks, since the lands will be of greater use to us. We can use our earthbenders to animate several lands at once, and since they all have haste, they can all swing out right away. Because our animated lands will return to the battlefield should they die or be exiled, we can add a touch more recklessness to swinging in with them. Lastly, because Earthbending deals in +1/+1 counters, we are putting a small engine in the deck to get value out of those counters we give out. The first part of our deck we'll discuss are our Earthbenders. These are the cards that are key to our strategy taking off. Toph herself triggers whenever we attack, whether or not she is the attacker, and so she can simply sit on the battlefield while we attack with other creatures to animate lands further. Avatar Kyoshi, Earthbender, is definitely a high end on the mana curve, sitting at 8 mana, but I remind you, we are on a lands matter deck, and so we can handle some heavy mana spells. That being said, during our turn, Avatar Kyoshi has hexproof, making her untouchable by interaction during our turn. That's helpful since at the beginning of combat on our turn, she earthbends 8 and untaps the land should it be tapped. This means that she makes us an 8/8 out of one of our lands each turn. You can also earthbend on the same land multiple times, so rather than go wide with multiple lands animated, she can also bulk up one land to be gigantic. Cards like Inkmoth Nexus or Secret Tunnel are great options here. Badger Mole Cub has an enter ability that earthbends 1. Whenever we tap a creature for mana, we add an additional green. Since our lands can still tap for mana while they're turned into creatures, this can help us ramp even further. Boomy Eclectic Earthbender earthbends 1 as he enters. Whenever he attacks, we put 2 +1/+1 counters onto each land creature we control. This is where the value is in his ability, giving our lands a substantial amount of extra bite. This card gets the most value from us going very wide with our animating of lands. Earth Kingdom General Earthbends 2 as he enters. Whenever we put +1/+1 counters onto a creature, we can gain that much life, but we can only do this once per turn. This is great to have out with Avatar Kyoshi, as she can put 8 +1/+1 counters onto a single creature and gain us 8 life. We are looking for resilience on the battlefield, and this gives us tenacity as the player to not die as the table begins to target us. Earthbending Student Earthbends 2 as it enters. Land creatures we control have vigilance. This is a crucial part for our deck. We want to keep lands up for interaction on opponents' turns, and having vigilance means any and all of our lands are up and ready to block or be used for mana on our opponent's turn. The Boulder Ready to Rumble has an attack trigger to Earthbend X, where X is the number of creatures we control with power 4 or greater. This is another benefit to going wide with our board, as it will give us more counters the more creatures we've bulked up. Since the Boulder has 4 power, we will always be earthbending at least 1 when he attacks. Toph the Blind Bandit Earthbends 2 as she enters, and her power is equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on lands we control. This makes her incredibly potent as a beat stick. We deal in a lot of +1/+1 counters in this deck, and so she can become very large quickly. Earthbender Ascension Earthbends 2 as it enters, and then we tutor a basic land card to put into play tapped. It also has Landfall, where we put a quest counter on it whenever a land we control enters. Once we hit 4 quest counters, we then begin to put +1/+1 counters onto a target creature we control and grant it trample for the turn. This can be a powerful way to begin making threats out of our larger land creatures. Normally, they can all just be chump blocked, even if they're those 8/8s that Avatar Kyoshi makes. But if we give them trample, our forces then become far more dangerous. The Legend of Kyoshi is an enchantment saga that has 3 chapters. The first draws us cards equal to the greatest power among creatures we control. At chapter 2, we Earthbend X, where X is the number of cards in our hand. That land also becomes an island in addition to its other types. Lastly, we exile the saga and return it transformed under our control. On the flip side, we have Avatar Kyoshi again, who then grants our lands we control both trample and hexproof. We can tap her to add X mana of any one color, where X is the greatest power among creatures we control. This can be a fantastic ramp spell once she transforms. Ba Sing Se has Earthbend 2 activated ability, but at sorcery speed. This is helpful to give us additional redundancy on the earthbending. Cracked Earth Technique and Earth Rumble both give us some earthbending on sorceries and some additional value on each. Rockalanche can be game-ending as well, as it earthbends X based on the number of forests we control. Get Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth out there to ensure that every land is a forest. We can even cast it from the graveyard for its flashback cost. Now let's discuss some cards that will grant us some value from playing our lands. Horn of Greed is a card that will benefit the table, but given that our deck seeks to play and use our lands far more than the rest of the table, this will break parity and give us the greater edge. We might not get the card draw from our lands returning to the battlefield off of the earthbending mechanic, but we're looking to play more lands with our ramp package, and so that makes up for the slight non-bow synergy. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, is one of my favorite green cards in Commander, and it's a force to be reckoned with here. This creature's stats are determined by the number of lands we control. It also makes our non-token creatures into forest lands in addition to their other types. Remember how with our earthbending we can animate our lands? While Ashaya is out, our creatures are also lands. This is a powerful card that fills in the gaps that our other earthbenders leave in their only targeting lands. So in theory, we can use powerful earthbend triggers like that of Avatar Kyoshi to bulk up our other creatures like Colonian Hydra while Ashaya is in play, because they are considered lands. Azusa Lost but Seeking is very fun in that she allows us to play 2 additional lands per turn. It's a very basic ability, but the amount of value that it gives our deck makes her right at home. Bristly Bill Spine Sower is a menace of a card that gives a +1/+1 counter upon the landfall trigger. We can also pay 5 mana to double the +1/+1 counters on all of our creatures. And since it need not tap to use, we can pay that 5 mana as many times as we wish to bulk up further and further until we can push for lethal. Evolution Sage plays nicely into all aspects of this deck. The Proliferate on the landfall can be used to give us extra experience counters, extra +1/+1 counters, all at once. Sylvan Safekeeper is our best protection in this deck. We can sacrifice a land to give a target creature Shroud until the end of turn, meaning no player can target it with spells or abilities. This plays nicely into the Earthbend mechanic, as those animated lands we sacrifice can return as lands so as don't lose board state. We can also use this to deal with interaction, giving Shroud at instant speed to avoid being targeted. The Earth King will enter and give us a 4/4 bear token. More importantly, whenever one or more creatures with power 4 or greater attack, we search our library for up to that many basic land cards and put them all onto the battlefield tapped. Say we swing in with 6 creatures that are all 4/4. We get 6 forests into play. Since we are in mono green and much of our ramp package prioritizes basic lands, we are running 25 basic forests, meaning that we have a lot of value to be had from the Earth King. Eudora, Grave Gardener, works very well with our deck, returning the creatures who die to the battlefield face down as forests. Since we can animate our lands, there are some shenanigans to be had in animating lands, letting them die, bringing them back as lands, animating them again, and so on. Burgeoning is one of the best turn 1 plays this deck can have. If we open with this and several lands in hand, we can start out with this in play, and by the time the turn cycle comes back to us, we might be able to play Toph and immediately begin our engines. Nissa, who shakes the world, gives us an extra green mana whenever we tap our forests, and she can animate our lands in a manner similar to the Awaken mechanic. Finally, we can ultimate her and get an emblem that not only gives our lands indestructible, but we can pull all the forests from our deck into play tapped. How many landfall triggers do you think this will give us for Toph? So lastly, I want to talk about some of the cards who are in the deck that will help with those +1/+1 counters. The Ozolith is a cornerstone to the deck, giving us a storage for our +1/+1 counters as the creatures thereon die, such as those Earthbending lands. We can move all of the counters from the Ozolith onto a target creature at the beginning of combat. If we have a creature that will threaten opponents with trample or unblockability, we can dump all of those counters on it to ensure it finishes the job. Armorcraft Judge is an underrated card draw engine for this deck, giving us card draw based on the number of creatures with +1/+1 counters on them. If we have a board full of animated lands and beefed up creatures, we can draw a ton of cards. Colonian Hydra is a classic in +1/+1 counter decks. As it swings, it doubles the counters on all of our creatures, which can be devastating if we've been slow simmering with some creatures for a while. Kodama of the West Tree is another ramp spell in disguise. Modified creatures, such as our creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, have trample. Whenever they deal combat damage to a player, we tutor for a basic land to enter play tapped. All of those lands we animate will bring out more lands we can animate, and it really does begin to snowball mid to late game. Sphere Grid gives creatures +1/+1 counters whenever they deal combat damage to a player, and then those creatures with +1/+1 counters on them have both reach and trample. Trample really is the point of contact we want to make with this list, as our creatures becoming huge only matters if we have a way to get them through to our opponent. Tale of Katara and Toph gives a +1/+1 counters to our creatures when they first become tapped each turn. Whether that land is a land creature tapping for mana or them attacking, this is a great way to get extra power out. Terra Symbiosis is the all-star in this deck and was perhaps the inspiration for me to build this deck. Once per turn, whenever we put a number of +1/+1 counters onto a creature, we draw that many cards. Our deck is all about animating lands and putting +1/+1 counters in bulk onto them. We could choose when to use Terra Symbiosis' ability and maximize the number of cards we draw. Something like Avatar Kyoshi, going back to that card again, puts 8 +1/+1 counters onto a creature, and if Terra Symbiosis is in play, we can draw 8 cards. Toph's ability scales and in could theory dump 10 or more counters onto a creature, and you can do the math. This deck needs to get Toph out early to maximize her ability. We want to begin a game with at least 3 lands in hand and at least 1 or more pieces of ramp. The reason being is once we get Toph out, our landfall triggers will accumulate experience counters, and we can begin animating our lands to do some attacking. Depending on what pieces of our engine show up as we progress, we can choose to either go wide with multiple lands being animated or go tall and have one unblockable land dominate. While we do run the possibility of folding to mass land destruction spells, we do run some protection for our lands that will give us added resilience, not to mention Earthbending allows lands to return to play should they die. I think this version of Toph has a very high ceiling, especially for mono green, between her easily triggered landfall ability and the payoff of animating our lands to become larger as the game progresses. I think earthbending is currently my favorite of the bending mechanics from this set, though we'll see if that holds true as we explore the others. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, likes and shares are greatly appreciated. If you want to check out the full deck list, the link to the Architect page will be in the description of this video. If you're new and you like what you see, subscribe for more Commander content, and as always, thanks for watching.